Welcome back to Spilling the Tea podcast with Kiki and Haylin. And this is episode
7.
Cheers!
Oprah and Gail could never. What? Did I say what?
Bestie, welcome back to episode 7, or
Welcome
not
back.
episode 7, but Spilling the Tea podcast episode 7. What are we going to be talking about today?
I think we should talk about how to empower your voice and how to speak up, like as women, or maybe not even as women, just as people, even like people who are younger or people who might feel intimidated at work or at school, maybe even in your family, like how to speak up. Why is that important?
I don't know, but this is a favorite topic of mine because I love speaking up. I love putting my foot down and really standing on the things that I think and I believe in, even if they may be wrong. I mean,
How did you
next
become
year
this
I'll
way? I feel like
change
it's
my-
natural for you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've always been like that. Like, I remember myself always kind of getting in trouble as a kid because I would like speak up, you know, and they would, not my parents, but like my family members would see it as like, oh, she's talking back.
Right.
You know, when in reality, I was just speaking up about what I thought about like some situation. You know what
Asian
I
culture
mean?
is like that too, or Hawaii culture, Asian culture. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to talk back or anything like that. And
Yeah.
so I think going over why are people silenced anyway? Like why are people suffering in silence, or why are people not speaking up? Like I would say, like right now, number one is like cultural, right? Or like, do you think it's like generational, or like
I think well, it's both. It's definitely something very cultural, right? But it's also something that has been carried into generations. However, it's definitely stopping at Gen Z. Like
Yeah.
these kiddos are really changing the world and changing how parenting looks like, changing what boundaries look like. So they're definitely the ones that are gonna be like encouraging their kids to speak up, you know?
Yes.
So yes, I definitely think it's something cultural, but also in generationals. In generations.
Yeah. And also like, you know, I work with doctors and med students, right? And a lot of times it's being a woman in medicine, right? And that's kind of like transferable to other careers in not only the medical field or the healthcare world. You know, I think in a lot of industries where it's like male dominated, it's hard for women to speak up or be respected in that way, even for non-binary folks or other people who are gender diverse. A lot of times they're afraid of what others will think.
Yes.
Have you ever like struggled with that, or?
Yeah, I feel like during high school, because you know it's like this crucial phase of yours where you think like, oh my God, life is gonna end. Like after high school, I better keep all of these friends. You know, I feel like there were many times where I chose to not speak the truth, or like not the truth, but like my truth, to avoid that like rejection from peers,
right.
or like, oh, if I say this, then they're not gonna like me anymore. So you know that fear of like, oh, what's gonna happen after I speak up? Like, is it
Right.
gonna affect negatively the relationship? So there were definitely many times where I chose not to speak up, and I deeply regret it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, is it people pleasing, or is it more like a survival skill, would you say?
I think it's more like well, for me, the times that I did choose to not speak up, it was more like a survival thing of like that fear that I don't want that person to leave. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, you know, if they don't like me speaking up and standing for what I think is right or my boundaries, etc., like they might leave, they might choose not to be my friend.
Right.
You know, so it's definitely that.
Yeah,
back
and
then.
and from a primal standpoint, we understand that we need to have a tribe, like we need to have community, even as babies are born, right? Like they need that skin to skin. And so even from a primal standpoint, we are not supposed to be alone or isolated. So some of that is natural. Some of that is, I think, part of our evolution. But when does it start to become detrimental is like when we start to now put other people's feelings or opinions, you know, above ours, and then we start to lose ourselves in that, right?
Yes.
But a lot of times, like we are trained as children to do that, to be sacrificial and to, you know, be very selfless. And so, how do you change that if you didn't grow up in a household that promoted that, right? Because we talk about culture. What else do we say? Generational.
Yeah.
Being afraid of what people think. But then also just not knowing how to speak up because it was never modeled for you. It was never talked about. Like no one ever told you. I mean, luckily my mom, she always told, even though she didn't necessarily maybe like would be super loud about everything, because my mom is super sweet and super nice.
Shout out
but
Tutu.
yes, like she's the best. But she always told me as a kid, like, oh, speak up, speak up. You know, like I don't want you to be afraid of speaking
that
up.
really speaks up in your family and is so bold. It's
Nanai.
Queen Nanai.
Yeah, I don't know, like skipped a generation, right?
Yeah, no, if there's definitely someone in your family that truly inspires me to like continue speaking up and standing up for myself is Nanai. Like,
Yeah.
she doesn't care what you may think. Like, she would stand by what she thinks, and she sees a boss bitch.
Yeah, like she won't be influenced by others, even if, you know, she's not going to be seen a certain way, or, you know, I mean, even I think the perfect example is like my grandmother, which is Matt, you know, my son, who's trans. That is the great grandmother.
Yeah.
Right. And so like when you think about how this great grandmother is totally mothering and like being accepting of LGBTQI plus and like coming to our events and, you know, saying, oh, Matt, just be like who you are. It's like very uncommon, and it's, you know, innovative and I think progressive, but like well beyond, like it transcends, right? Like when you love this grandchild, great grandchild, like nothing's gonna get in between you and that love. And so that has been, I think, the most powerful kind of like transformation that we've seen. And I am very grateful, because had we decided not to speak up about this, right, then I wouldn't have this entire like healing of anyway, this side or that side of the family anyway.
And I think that you also practice a lot of like, you know, very boldly speaking up is when, you know, very, very early on in Maddie's transition, like there was a lot of people in your family or like friends of the family or whatever that they were like giving their very strong opinions that were not really helpful. And you were like, okay, you know what? Like this is where it ends. Like this is where I draw the line. Whether you like it or not, you cross the line to support me, or you just don't cross it at all.
Right. It's either like be supportive or not, but, you know, please respect our boundaries when we say like this is how we're going to raise our child, you know?
Yeah, and I wish that every single youth out there, especially the ones in the LGBTQIA community, I wish they had that resource, you know, that would empower them to speak up and not like stay on their shell, you know, because that's the only place that feels safe. I really, really wish that all youth, especially our LGBTQI kiddos, had the courage to speak up, you know, but there's always the fear of rejection. There's always the fear, you know, that anxiousness of like, what are they going to say? What are they going to think? Are they going to invalidate me, you know?
Yeah, and some of it really is like valid. I mean, all of it is valid. Like, let's be real. Everyone's feelings are valid. But what I'm saying is there is an actual safety concern for LGBTQI plus youth, right? Like there is a higher risk of violence, and we look at the political climate right now. And so we don't want to hyper focus on all the negative things, but we don't want our kids, any of our kids, to live in fear. And so that's why we still choose to speak up, even though it may feel uncomfortable. And even for like kids who are not in the LGBT, you know, community, the same exact thing. Like we also need to encourage them to speak up as well. Like for instance, today, you know, I had someone that I met with where it's like, well, I just think that you should speak up and say, hey, this is what I want from our relationship, right? I hope that we can be closer, and like it's not intentional, but I need to express to you when you do this behavior how it makes me feel, right? Because if I'm trying to be closer to you and I'm feeling like rejected every time I try to like hang out with you, like I just want to see like where you're at. You know what I mean? So it's really hard to do that if you were raised in a family that only knows how to yell.
Yeah.
Right? Or like it's really hard to do that if you grow up in a family where everyone is silent and brushed everything under the rug and then we just don't talk about it, right? How are you supposed to develop this skill if you've never seen it like in your household? And I think for viewers out there who don't have that experience and they just don't know where to start, it really is making a commitment to feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Can you say more like about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. But before we dive in more into that, I do want to say that we as an adults, we are the ones that put the limits on who speaks up, because like kids are naturally born speaking up. Like you're gonna say that this is soda and they're gonna be like, no, like that's juice,
Right.
like, and then we just shut them down and we're like, oh no, like this is what I say it is, so
Right.
that's what's gonna be, like just because you're older doesn't mean that you're right, and doesn't mean that you should be, telling a kid like, oh no, you're wrong. Because sometimes kids, like even toddler babies, they would communicate with you effectively, like, oh mom, I'm feeling this or that, or mom, I don't like this or that, and you're like, oh no, like you have to eat this, you know what I mean? Like allow them to express their needs, allow them to express themselves, because when we don't allow kiddos to speak up, then we are creating then a kid that's going to be sheltered later on, like also I feel like it kind of helps a lot with your social skills,
Yeah.
growing up.
Yeah, and having that interpersonal skills and like being able to effectively communicate, right?
Yeah.
It just, I think it can benefit you in many aspects of life, not just like advocating for yourself or like self protection. If you learn how to communicate your needs, like number one, I wanted to try to teach people from this episode, like how to cultivate that skill. Number one, feeling uncomfortable, right? And saying, I don't have this skill, recognizing that I don't have this skill and that it is actually a skill set that can be learned and developed. That's number one. Because if you just throw your hands up and say, like, this is just how I am, you know what I mean? Because I see a lot of those too. Or it's like, well, this is how I am. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to fight for your limitations, then you get to keep them. And someone told me that and it like really resonated with me. It's like, if I'm going to keep like fighting for my limitations of why I can't do this and why I'm going to like not take this advice from my therapist who actually really cares about me, right? If I'm going to fight for those limitations, then I will have to keep them and I will have to just like stay stuck. And again, shout out Billy, July life coach. Like he would just tell me, well, then don't change. Like, I don't, it's not, close the cafe. I don't care. Like, whatever, like just if you want to keep fighting for why you can't do X, Y, and Z, then keep that excuse and keep that limitation. And so, number one, do you even have the self awareness to say, I want to feel uncomfortable, I want to build this skill, right? Number two, I need you, Kiki, in our team meetings every single Wednesday to say one thing out loud, because you're usually silent in the meetings. And so I want you to practice this skill. So you might feel nervous and you might be shaking the first and second time, right? But now the way that you speak, you lead those meetings, right? And you're presenting to all these state agencies and we're putting Kiki's face out there. And I know you guys see her leveling up out there too, right? But my point
I had
is,
no choice. I was like
Kiki,
told
wow.
to.
Kiki, wow.
DOL, don't take it serious. I'm kidding.
No.
Not being forced.
Well, I was trying to make an example of like the concept of learning how, you have to speak up. That's the only way to start to build that skill. And so, can you give another example of like how people can practice speaking up, even if they don't want to, even if they feel scared to speak up? Like, what's a good exercise to get yourself feeling uncomfortable? And
sometimes I like to do, like, I know that you don't have to speak right away if you're not comfortable with, but if you want to wait till later, what I would do is that I would journal it, right? And if it still bothers you within 48 hours, reach out to them. If you don't want to speak up in a public space because there's like other friends or other colleagues, just try having a talk like privately, but still speak up for your needs and stick to your boundaries. Very important, because when you don't, you're just disrespecting yourself. You know what I mean? And speaking up also gives you I forgot the word, but I'm gonna remember. It empowers you to stay authentic to yourself. That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, and that takes practice, right? Because a lot of us, or maybe me or my generation, like we didn't learn how to be empowered. Like it wasn't like a thing back then.
So sad.
But yeah, and so you bring up a good point, which is regulation, like emotion regulation. What that means is, can you speak in a way that you're not like losing your cool, right? Like you're not losing your cool, and and that takes practice. Okay, all of you know like where your thermometer is of like, some people can only speak up when they're mad. Like that's the only time you literally can speak up, right? If you can regulate yourself and then speak, or like we try to teach the kids, like, oh, you can say whatever you want as long as it's respectful, right?
Yeah.
And then we get so mad because we're like, damn, that was respectful. And like, it's so irritating still.
Poor thing.
I know. But anyway, like if you can regulate yourself, right? That's the first step. So if you can't speak up because you're feeling your nervous system like rise and you're getting like super anxious, yeah, maybe don't speak, but start to formulate in your head, what would you want to say if you could say it? Right? So baby steps in the right direction. Like, are you following? Or I sometimes feel like I'm just talking in my head. And I don't know does it make sense?
It does make sense. That's too funny. No, but I was also gonna say that another thing that
No, because you weren't like, yeah, like, you know, like
I was listening. I
Oh,
was letting
yeah.
you go. Oh, this bestie girl. I was gonna like say something right after that.
Well, I was trying to say, like, I want people who are listening to this podcast to take action, even if it's a baby step, like saying, okay, I can't speak up yet, but I am noticing like this rising feeling of anxiety, and I'm gonna try to formulate what I would want to say, right?
I got it. So what
Okay.
I was gonna also say is that when you do choose to speak up, I think something that has really helped me tremendously is that I try to speak up, but I also try to be a little bit vulnerable because you don't want to speak up and be so defensive about it because people immediately just like put a wall against that.
Right,
You know what I
right,
mean? But when
exactly.
you're like calm and like more vulnerable, it's definitely a lot easier to deliver the message to the recipient.
Yes. And for people who are married or like in relationships, right? Like my couples therapist, shout out Dr. Riley. Does he have Instagram? Anyway, he said that like, are they like porcupines or something? But are they porcupines? So porcupines are something with pokey stuff.
Oh, it's a little like hamster looking animal.
Something.
Yeah.
You
With the
have to
things.
like, if when they're gonna mate, you have to like touch their nose like this, like come, like look at me. Like if I was to go like this, and then the porcupine things come down, so they can mate. Because if not, right? So like that whole.
That's cute.
Wait, I'm thinking of the analogy of like.
So, babe, if you're watching this and I'm upset, just rub my nose and I'll be fine. I'll calm down.
So like if you want to talk to the person and you have like an issue, you need to communicate something, you need to speak up, then try to prep that person for what the conversation is going to be. Don't come in like super angry, like with your thorns up. Like put your thorns down. And another tip for that is to make sure like when you're, like we actually do this at Spill the Tea Cafe, where if we're going to talk to someone about whatever, right? Like an issue or anything that comes up, any kind of performance, anything like that, we always want to make sure, or management, we always want to make sure it's one-on-one. Like we're not trying to have a conversation, or we're not trying to call you out in front of the whole team, right? That's not how we do things there. And so when you speak up, it's important, if you can, not to do it in a place where there's other people around. Unless it's a safety issue, then I would say, then I would say to make sure there's always someone with you.
Yeah.
My ADHD.
So that's exactly what I was going to talk about. Like,
okay,
what are some scenarios that have put you really on an uncomfortable place? For example, if someone is like constantly misgendering the other person, you know, then I'm gonna need to speak up on it, just to protect the person, and then also educate the person that is misgendering the other.
right?
You know.
And that goes for a lot of like advocacy too, like bullying, right? Like if you speak up on other people's behalf, or you speak up on people who are marginalized and they don't, that's why it's so important to hear different voices, right? So that the representation increases, and that we're not only listening to like old white men.
Period. I knew she was gonna say that. And also another reason why we speak up so much at the cafe, it's because we want to model that to the teens.
And I'm not just trying to be mean to men, I promise you. I'm saying the entire industry of psychology is founded upon white men. So everything that we still practice today is involving that. And so, that's another thing I'm super excited about is that we get Hi'ilani, and we're going to start offering Ho'oponopono services at Spill the Tea Cafe. Oh my God, that is so awesome. I'm
Shout
super
out to
excited.
Hi'ilani.
Hi'ilani is like from the bloodline of Lili'uokalani. No joke.
That's not gonna go in. It's like not related at all.
No, but it was, I just wanted to, like, I was super excited
So
about
this is
that.
how you speak up. I am telling our director like that it's not gonna go on the video because
Right.
it does not relate anything with this.
Yes.
But if you guys want to find out more information about that, just reach out via info@spillyteacafe.org. And going back to the whole like
Speaking
empowering
up.
people to speak up. Do you have a time of your life outside of Matt's situation where you were like, no, I'm gonna speak up? I can give you a hint.
Oh my God, like all the time. I never want to speak up.
Can we talk about that one time?
You forced me to do this podcast.
Low-key. Well, not really. Billy did.
Yeah, but I'm saying like, so these things are not super comfortable for me and they're not very enjoyable. But then I believe that I'm growing by putting myself in an uncomfortable position. But you make it a lot easier for me.
Oh, cute.
Yeah?
That's too sweet. Can we cheers for that? Sorry, I couldn't say the word sweet. ESL. No, that is very cute. I do hope to always, like, are you crying?
No, I was just itching my face.
Scratching.
Okay. Yeah.
I do hope that I always encourage you to like, not only speak up, but just like continue honoring your like true self. You know what I mean?
Wait, let me think of a time.
I have a time. I'm hoping it's the same time. Think about
when I had to speak up and I didn't want to.
Yeah. Remember at your like former work?
Oh,
we had
God.
to speak up against the white guy.
Yeah. So many times I have to speak up.
She said confidential.
Yeah. I mean,
classified information. Bestie, there are so many times where Haylin has had to put her foot down and be like, this is not happening, or this is how I feel about this. And it has low key, well, actually, it has high key filtered out the people that align with her vision and mission. Do you remember? I don't know if I should say this, but if I'm thinking about it, I am gonna say it.
You basically said it already.
I know. Do you remember?
Do you remember? Oh, hint, like.
No, do you remember?
No, just say it. Just
Okay,
tell them.
Do you remember the first year at Spility Cafe? We were like looking for people that align with our vision and mission, and there was this one person that was like, "Oh yeah, hire me for a year," and we're like,
"Kiki, don't! Oh my God, Kiki!"
And we had to speak up. We had to be like, "No." And then they were trying to change the systems at Spill the Tea, as in like we're an inclusive safe space, but they wanted us to be like more like
don't.
It's church oriented.
It's too fresh.
And we had to speak up and be like, we get that you're coming with good intentions, but
Kiki, don't.
This is the journey.
Babe, you gotta cut this out.
Oh yeah.
You have to take that out.
Can you just beep it?
That's why I should just retire as a therapist. Honestly, like this bitch is gonna get my license revoked anyway.
What I'm saying is that it was uncomfortable because there's stuff.
We're cutting this out, right?
Yeah.
No.
Kiki, we have to. She is. She texts
She
me
didn't
all the
even
time
show up
about
to her
it.
birthday. Does she really text you?
Kind of. Like,
see, she won't speak up. She's not being authentic to herself.
See, yeah. So okay, but wait. Let's.
So
come
that-
on, Kiki.
so
Compromise.
There's no like black pullback. But what's the worst that can happen, right?
Exactly. But
What's the worst that can happen?
nothing, because she doesn't support. Well, I mean, what? That we get an unfollow?
You want to lead in a way that people want to follow. You don't want to lead in a way that like puts people like.
Okay.
Just you can say a little bit broader. You can say it like that. Like don't be so specific.
High key, I won't lie. We took like a 10-minute break, so we're like, what did we last say before we went on a break? But
I want to
bottom
give people some tangible things to walk away with. So number one, when you start to speak up, you have to already know that this is going to be good for you, even though it's uncomfortable. So like making that decision, right? Are you going to make that decision or not? Take action. Number two, you're going to have to clarify for yourself, what is the goal of like what I'm trying to say? Like, what is the goal of, when I said formulate what you're trying to say, what is the goal of speaking up to me? Is the goal to become closer with your husband? Is the goal to...
Or wife, or girlfriend, or boo.
Yeah, or is the goal to support them? Or is the goal to set a boundary? Or is like, I don't know, can you give me more examples?
Validating your thoughts. Is the goal to deliver a way that you think? Is the goal to defend someone, protect someone?
Right.
Is the goal to express your needs? That's a big one. I feel like I struggled with that in the past. That like I would be in a relationship and I wouldn't speak up my needs, right? Because of the fear of like, oh, they're not able to meet those needs, so then I might lose the person. When in reality, now I speak my needs, and honestly, if you can meet them, then you gotta go. You know what I mean?
Or compromise.
Yes, I'm not compromising.
No, but sometimes in relationships you have to compromise. You know what I mean? But
No,
sometimes...
I do compromise. I actually do compromise. But it's a kind of compromise that does not put my needs below off. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's not going to make you betray yourself, right? Or like
Exactly.
abandon like your values or like the core beliefs. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about in general, right? Relationships need to compromise at times. And so you think of the goal, right? Because if you don't have a goal and you're just like pissed off and you just want to scream at someone for no reason, like take note of that. Right? Like it may not be the best time to vocalize or speak up if you have no goal for that. If my goal is that I want to grow Spill the Tea Cafe and I want to build my team, then speaking up when I enter a conversation with Kiki or with anyone on my team, the goal is, again, to grow Spill the Tea Cafe, to have like the staff feel supported and make sure that they're feeling listened to. That doesn't mean I can always make everyone happy. It doesn't mean that you're going to be able to make everyone happy. But at least explaining the why behind your decision, right? That opens up, again, that kind of psychological safety where you can communicate openly. So I feel like we don't know how to speak up. And so number one, really making that decision that you want to work on it. Number two, like cultivating what the goal is. And then what's number three?
I don't know, but I do have to say that speaking up is also a form of self-care. Very important.
Wait, let me just say number three then. You really said, let me just move on because who knows what this boomer is saying. But no, for real. So number three is actually being able to vocalize with words, right? If you can't vocalize with words, if you cannot vocalize with words, you need to vocalize with text message or vocalize with written email. Do you know what I mean? Get it out of you though. Don't just keep it in and then be mad like 10 years later for the same thing. Like we only got one life. You know what I mean?
And a short life.
I'm going through menopause.
No, it's too funny working with a boomer. You guys don't understand.
I'm only a boomer in tech. Like me and Nanai, I feel like Nanai is better than me.
Nanai is like Gen Z.
Yeah.
Again, like Nanai is Matt's great grandma. But
great grandma.
She's amazing. Chef kiss. But yes, like I was saying, vocalizing and speaking up is definitely a form of self-care. I feel so good after I speak up, even though like it's a little uncomfortable at the time.
Yeah.
I remember I used to not like speak up about my beliefs or like opinions with my parents just because I always let them just,
think you're perfect?
No, think that they're in the right?
Oh, like when you're arguing?
Yeah, no, when we're arguing, just like with things that they don't agree, right?
Oh, okay.
So I remember when I first got my like very first tattoo, my mom was so upset, like end of the world for her. And then when I got my second tattoo a month later, she called me and she was like, "What? Are you trying to be like a graffiti, like, you know, like a graffiti mural?" And I'm like, "Mom, listen, like, I get it that you don't like it. That's why you don't have any tattoos.
Yeah.
However, I am gonna make and do tattoos on myself, and like, you need to be okay with it because I'm not harming you. I'm not harming me. Like, I'm doing something that I like and I want, right? And also, like, I wasn't living at her home anymore. Like, I was taking care of myself. You know what I mean? Like, the dynamic kind of changes. Like, yes, she's my mom, but we're in a period of my life where I get to make decisions for myself, and you just become like a very, very, very close friend of mine. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
She's still my mom, though, right?
Of course.
And then on the other hand, my dad, shout out dad, I'm sure you're seeing this, reposted it on Facebook. Appreciate
so
it.
cute. I
He's so
love you,
cute. He
uncle.
reposts our YouTube videos and then he likes him himself.
I
It's
love
adorable.
that.
But and then on the other hand, my dad, he's always being like, "Oh, whatever, you know, as long as you don't as long as you like it and as long as it's a design that you're not gonna regret later on, then why not?" You know?
Right.
But he doesn't have any tattoos himself. And then my grandma, she will literally like cry every time she sees me. She's like, "Oh, another tattoo." I'm like, "Grandma, come on. It's getting too old already."
With tears?
Yes, like she will cry.
Oh my God, poor
I
thing,
know.
Kiki.
I'm like, Grandma,
Damn,
come
why can't you just
on.
wear long sleeves around her?
I don't know, but I try. Also, it's very hot in Puerto Rico, so every time I go visit, I'm like sweating, so no. But there's that. And then last but not least, moving to Hawaii, I really, really had to do a lot of advocacy for myself. Because, you know, coming out of a divorce and moving to an island so far away from home,
Yeah,
and
that's
like just
true.
being on my own, they were like, "Oh, you shouldn't do it. You know, you've been gone for so long already. Like, why don't you stay near the family?" And I'm like, "No, like, I need to follow my dreams." You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
know where my passion is, and it's definitely not here on the mainland, you know?
Yeah.
So I really had to do a lot of advocacy to, you know, defend myself and defend the reason why I'm making all these choices, you know?
Yeah.
So definitely felt like self-care.
And it's scary because a lot of people, maybe also in your culture and in the Asian culture, like we do just live our life based on what our parents expect of us or what people in our family expect of us. And we don't even have the opportunity to explore what we would actually do if we had a clean slate, you know? And I talk to a lot of med students who say like, yeah, I didn't really have a choice. I'm just, you know, maybe I had a choice of like what specialty I'm going to go into, but I didn't have a choice like, this is kind of what you're going to do or this is what we expect of you. And so to take that leap that you did, right, is very, I think, uncommon, but very fulfilling. And I think that it is a privilege too, like having that courage and being able to fulfill your dreams in the way that you are or the way that we are. Because everybody knows and they can feel it and they can feel it in the energy. It's something that's hard to measure, but in the cafe, like when Kiki's there is a vibe, right? Like, or all of the volunteers who like have their heart at the cafe, like there is a vibe.
Shout out Marcel. He's
Yeah,
so
all of
funny.
them. And so we really want to be responsible for that energy that we bring to our clients, but also to this friendship, to this business. And we just want everyone to lean into that opportunity of speaking up, no matter where you are in your life. We know that it is a transferable skill and it can benefit you. So we do hope that you continue to practice that self-care in speaking up. For homework, this is like if I was to give a client homework, right? It's like, okay, well, this week I want you to speak up in every meeting that you're at, right? Or what's another homework that you might give maybe a teenager, like a teen mentor?
I would give them the task of compiling 10 things in a journal of things that you strongly believe in and that you firmly agree with, and just, you know, try to stand up for those things, you know, during that week, whether it's like, I don't know, what's an example of something that you stand up for that you don't used to not practice?
Well, now a lot of LGBT advocacy, right? Like being able to go into schools and say like, could we have these accommodations, or could you, you know, understand that there is a co-occurring, you know, issue going on that is not just what meets the eye, or you know, just being able to speak up on behalf of like med students, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of
But
times,
that's a good example. Like
Yeah.
the LGBTQI advocacy, okay, like write that down, write in your journal, and that week maybe share 2 or 3 like Instagram posts to your stories that relate to LGBTQI, and then you're speaking on that topic, you know, even though it feels uncomfortable, because I feel like practice takes you to the goal.
right, to the next level, and it gets easier and easier, or it feels more natural. And then I guess another homework I might give someone is deciding what core beliefs you have that like nobody can take from you. So, for instance, maybe someone's gonna say, "I want family to be my value," right? And like you define that success. So if you believe that like having a successful family means that you're going to be a stay-at-home mom, speak up for that. Stand up for that. Don't just say, "Oh yeah, like I want to be working," if you don't, and then vice versa, right? Like if
Oh, I have one. I have one. I am gonna have a doula and a midwife for when I have a baby. And people are
Yeah.
like, why are you doing that if you have hospitals? I'm like, it's so much better to go the holistic way, at least in my opinion, to be in your home, being able to give birth in water. Like, I'm gonna speak up for that. That's a core of mine. Like, I will do that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. And then even I just thought of the teens, our teen advisory council we had yesterday. Like the teens speaking
That was
up
a great
on
meeting.
yeah, them speaking up on yeah, I don't like how the hospital is re-traumatizing me and like, misgendering me and saying like, well, you're fine. And I mean, like, obviously, like you look like that. So what do you expect? I mean, just stuff like that to be able to speak on that and say, hey, that's really hurtful or whatever the teens were saying to educate whoever is speaking to them, even as an adult. I think that was very courageous. And I promise you, like that adult is not going to make that mistake again, right?
You know what? Talking about adults and that meeting. So this happened a few weeks back, but we actually had Senator Hirono visit us, and our teens were very courageous to really like speak up on what are some of the barriers that we're currently facing in the state of Hawaii, or like what are some changes that you would like to see implemented. One of the things that was brought up is that at school here in the state of Hawaii they have their counselors, but they're like constantly changing. So the patient never gets to engage with that, counselor or therapist before they get changed again. And it's like little things like that. And then they are able to bring it up to the table and speak up on it. I think that was fantastic.
Yeah, and also them saying, I am very resourced. Like there are some kids on our advisory council from, private schools, and they're saying, I'm in private school and, I'm supposed to have this access to mental health, but even for someone like me, it took me 6 months to get in with a therapist, and then I had to start meds because, it was getting so bad that I had to just start meds without therapy, and we all know that that's not like the best practice, and it really shines light on like if resource people are having this issue, right? We need to speak up on it. If not, who's gonna know and who's gonna care and who's gonna actually try to implement change?
Yeah.
Right. So it's all kind of like integrated in my opinion. And so speaking up again, right? We're like definitely trying to convince you to speak up.
Yeah, well, it's just, very unfortunate. All the people that I encountered that, they're going through stuff and they're like, oh yeah, I just rather not speak up. So I just hope that if you got to the end of this video, that there's one thing that you take away with you, and it's that you have the power and the space to speak up for yourself. And that when you don't do that, you're just disrespecting yourself and breaking your own boundaries. So if you don't know where to find us, you can go to spilltheteacafe.org. We're also on Instagram, spilltheteacafe. No, spill_the_tea_cafe. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us info@spilltheteacafe.org. See you
Thank
then.
you.
Bye. Wow.